I am going to talk about azaleas, camellias, and rhododendrons. I have been working on pruning for a very long time, so a lot of the things are going to be a little bit of the tips that I have learned, and things that are usual and common problems and common things that happen to them, and what will be my approach. So it's not the approach, it's just my approach and the way I do things. So here we have the plant needs, and I want to emphasize a little bit about it, or I want to talk a little bit about it, because I have again, I have a few things that I want to kind of like highlight. So we have, we all know that the azaleas, camellias, and rhododendrons like regular water. However, we went into drought, and we may be still having the same amount of water restrictions. So we want to make sure that we have a handle of the situation. So water, I realized that azaleas, camellias, and rhododendrons, they were more drought tolerant than a lot of other plants. The one difference that I realized is that azaleas, they don't have a really deep root system. So during the drought, I realized that azaleas were better when you put a little bit of water, more regular, and rhododendrons and camellias that produce a deep water, deep root system, you want to actually do deep watering instead of just a little bit of water every other day or something like that. So that is one of the differences that I saw. If you want to adjust, you can adjust by adjusting the meters, adjusting the time. But that is one of the things I realized. They all did really good in the drought. I was amazed. The one thing I saw, it was maybe less of the flowers, or maybe not. Some of the azaleas produce flowers 2 times a year, and they did really good in spring and so in summer. But rather than that, I do have to say that most of them has the drought test in my opinion. Also, we know that these plants are acid-loving plants. So if we want to add soil, we want to add acidity to the soil, we want to just make sure that we are not adding really, we are not raising the acidity too much. So they are actually, so the acidity measurements come from 0 to 14, 0 being alkaline, so the less acid, and 14 being the most acid. So what happened? 7 is neutral. These plants like between 6 and 6.5. So it's just one notch up, one notch down in the acidity spectrum. So we want to make sure that we are kind with the soils, because when we add a lot of materials that add the low the acidity too much, what is going to happen is the plants start suffering. So they get stunted, they cannot get nutrients, especially like really good key nutrients for the plant, like phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, potassium. So you want to make sure that you don't add, and on some of the other plants, they don't like so much acidity. So here I have like a little box with be careful. These are the things that you can buy for acidity that will be really, that can burn your plant and can actually unbalance the pH in the soil really fast, really quick. One mistake, and you're going to have to deal with that damage for long time. So it's not that they don't work, it's that they are really strong. And we don't need to add so much acidity in the soil. So my suggestion for adding acidity is to use, like you can use organic matters like pea moss, coffee grounds, pine needles. That will add acidity and help for the structure of the soil. and or you can do fertilizers that are already really good for acidity. So for example, the cottonseed meal is a spectacular fertilizer that raise the acidity. There are specific fertilizers like acid mix or the Rhododendron Azalea Camellia food that is also already good for the acidity. If you have a plant that has the soil level, the pH level is too low, so it's too acid. So then your plant may not produce a lot of flowers or no flowers, and or your plant also shows stress with temperature changes. So they get really yellow during the winter because you don't have that magnesium and the calcium, and that help with that. Phosphorus help with the flowers. So you can actually, and they get yellow, but yellow, you know, they get yellow with a lot of things. So you wanna see if they have more than one symptom, and you can say, okay, I went too strong with the acidity. If you go with these low release fertilizers that are organic, meaning they are made like with natural elements, so they are less harmful and they will not burn the plants, even if you made a mistake of putting too much or too often. So in the case that you went with something synthetic, like the one in the Be Careful box, the iron sulfur, the aluminum sulfate, or the ammonium sulfate. So then one of the things that you can do if you are seeing symptoms of no flowers, stunted growth, yellow all over, getting yellow in cold weather, so then you know that that was a problem with the acidity, and then you can put a little bit of gypsum. Again, I will say, let's don't play with the chemistry of the soil. I think that we humans have learned that nature knows best. We just need a little help. And but if you made already that mistake, so then gypsum, and I will put compost and gypsum until the soil, and that could help. If it's not helping, then maybe you're gonna have to remove some of the soil, but that is like the end of the road. Now we have the most common diseases for the azaleas, rhododendrons, and camellias. So we have the petal blight, we have the leaf blight, and I kind of make groupings so it goes easy and straightforward. So this grouping is all about like what do you use. So they are all funguses, petal blight, leaf blight, and leaf gall. The leaf gall, I don't know if the picture shows it, but the leaves get really thick. They have different cycles when they come out. The petal blight, of course, is when the flowers are there. The leaf blight, it just comes out throughout the year. And the leaf gall usually shows in the spring growth. They usually, what I use for those, all of them, is the copper fungicide. So you just, again, be aware, you know, that the copper and the bees and the flowers, maybe we don't know what is going to happen with that, so we don't want to put that if you have a lot of bees in your plants. But put the copper according with the cycle of the plant and the bottle, the instructions in the bottle. You want to make sure that you are putting in at the right time. It's not at any time, because the spores and everything has like a timing. So look at the cycle of the plant, look at the cycle of the disease, and then you know where to apply it. Or look at the bottle and the bottle will tell you. The one other important thing about controlling these diseases is doing the mechanical control, which means picking up the leaves and the flowers, and also removing some of the leaf galls when they are there. Some people had a theory about the leaf galls producing spores if you leave them there dry for a long time. So none of them you are transmitted it by the tools or your gloves. They all get transmitted, moved by the wind and through spores. So just make sure that the copper fungicide, you use the copper fungicide for that. I usually select the one that is the Celeranes loads, and I select the one that is concentrated, because if disease is a little bit, like I see all my Camellia has those brown burn tips, so then I put a little bit more concentrated. If it's just for prevention, I go a little bit more lighter in the spray. Then we have the most common deficiencies or leaf affections. I didn't, and the reason why I put leaf affections and no deficiencies is because I want to add this last one over here. That is the yellow mottle virus. So in here we have the common in the, especially rhododendrons and camellias. So we have the iron deficiency, that is the yellow between the veins. And the veins stay green. We have the next one, that is the magnesium deficiency, that had that V shape, and usually affects kind of like the older leaves. The nitrogen deficiency, that is all the leaves in general are yellow, or a big section is yellow, and the whole leaf is kind of like yellow. So that is the difference in the look of the disease. And so you can identify. Important thing is that you identify what is the deficiency, and then you know what to do. So then the last one here is this virus. So the reason why I put it here is because this virus is something that it gets confusing sometimes for people. So the way that I identify the virus is kind of like has no pattern. You can see is everywhere, is just like the whole leaf, is like random decolorations, and the contrast of the greens, the yellows can be strong or can be subtle, can be like a splash of water looking things. So that virus has really irregular patterns. It goes through pieces of leaf, branches, all of it, you never know. That virus is on the plant, and you are not going to be able to treat it. And according with what I read, you don't transmit it from plant to plant. But I will say, if you don't like the look, you cannot do anything. For the nitrogen, so you can put fish emulsion that will help right away. It's liquid and the plant can absorb it right away. For the magnesium and the iron, one of the things I put there is that one of the reasons that this happens with camellias and rhododendrons is because maybe at that time your soil is actually a little bit too alkaline. So in that case, you want to add the cottonseed meal. And so that will balance it like that. You don't really need to go with aluminum, or you can then put the iron and the magnesium. But the idea with this is usually you do have most of the nutrients in your soil. Is how you plant, is the plant available? Is the material available? Is the plant be able to get in the nutrients? So then we have the most common pests, and this is the last part of this. So the most common pests are the cottony scale, the tea scale, and the normal scale with the little hard shell. Those are things that we see a lot in places where the plant is being really crowded. Is really shaded. The conditions are perfect for this plant, for these little insects, or pests. So we want to make sure that you have a plant that is airy, open, that helps for that. So again, that is the mechanical. And then you want to apply like an insecticide. So here I have 3 of the insecticides that I use. Again, I am a little bit more like natural conscious. What do I put in the ground? What is going to affect the plants? So the first one is an insect repellent. this one don't specify that works for scales, but I had not tried. But I like it is just because it's made of garlic and it just has garlic, period, anything else. So that will be my first try. I put here a note under because I do read every description in the bottles. So it called my attention when I read this one that says, don't apply during or preceding pollination. So it could be a little bit touchy, the garlic and the bees. So make sure of that. So in case that treating all these diseases and pests and everything, we want to make sure that we time it, that we are putting the product that in the right time, the right disease or pest cycle, but also we want to make sure that if we're putting a product, we are not affecting the beneficial insects. So then we have the thrips. The thrips here are really common in azaleas and rhododendrons, even if they are like in the perfect place. So they are really susceptible to it. Yeah. So these two, this is a miticide. This one is also really good ingredients on it. They are all things that I can pronounce. They are and there is not a description. They say you can use it all time throughout, even throughout the pollination time. So the miticide here. And then we have this one, the Captain Jack dead bug. The dead bug kills most of the things at any time, all the time. So just follow the instructions on the labels, but these are the ones that I use the most when it comes. So I start with the insect repellent or with the miticide, and if the scale, for example, is one that you have to be really constant and throughout a long period for them to be gone because the cycle. And so you want to make sure that you treat it all the way. One of the things that I didn't put here, but they have it at slots, is they have one that is systemic. I know that scales can be really, really hard to deal with. And so you can use a systemic. That means it's a product that you put in the ground and the plant take it, and you will be so pretty much if the animal chew on the plant or anything like that, the leaves and everything has that material, that product, and they will die. This I didn't put it here because I want to make sure that you know it's dangerous. You don't want to put it in vegetables, you don't want to put it in fruit, you don't want to put it in anything like that. And that we don't know what is going to happen with bees or flowers or anything like that. So pretty much it's systemic, it's inside the plant, so it could affect more than just what we wanted. So that's why I didn't put it here, but it exists and they sell it at slots. So then if you have any questions, we can go through questions about the Camellia and Azalea problems. Just let me know. But I am going to start with a little bit of that pruning that we have been talking.
Hey, Elizabeth, before you move on to pruning, the couple questions that I had are about fertilizing. And I know you kind of talked about it quickly at the beginning. And the questions were more like when to fertilize, and if it's blooming, is it too late to add fertilizer, or is there still time to, to fertilize even once it's in bloom?
Yeah. Okay. So fertilizing, you can fertilize these plants anytime throughout the year, anytime. Anytime actually. You can do winter fertilizer because they are evergreens. So evergreens are always taking the fertilizer, especially if you use a slow release fertilizer. We try to tell people like prune after flowering, fertilize after flowering. It's kind of like rule of thumbs, things that people will remember. and gets in you, it gets on you, and you're like, oh yeah, prune after flowering. Now I know when. Instead of me telling you, well, you have to prune from spring to fall, or you have to put fertilizer from this time to this time. So you can put fertilizer anytime in your plants, especially like, for example, if you have a plant that has problems with, for example, your pH was off, and then your plants were kind of yellow or were really stressed. So then in that case, I will say, well, you could put some of the fertilizers that had calcium close to fall. So that is when you start kind of like being really detailed of when to put fertilizers, because it's whatever you need. A lot of the phosphorus, for example, all these plants, Azaleas, Camellias, and Rhododendrons, produce the bud in fall. So a lot of the times I say, well, put phosphorus like in summer, so like that the plant has that food ready for them at the time they are producing the bud in fall. So you could go really detailed, or you can say, you know what, you can plant, you can fertilize throughout the year. Okay, so now azalea pruning. So with the azalea pruning is something that I will say, I try to just do kind of like a maintenance pruning in azaleas. It's something that I got quick. I see, you know, like they grow really good themselves. It's nothing that you need to work in a structure. You don't need to, you know, you don't have a budget of pruning, meaning it's not like you have to be concerned on how much you are pruning. They are really forgiving, and they are really nice themselves. The one thing is dwarf azaleas, like the really small ones, they don't grow much. So you don't really want to prune much. I had one azalea that it was pruned really hard, and it just stayed there for a while. So they are not really good at prune hard. They will come back, the dwarf ones. Rather than that, most of the azaleas have really good growth pattern, and they grow throughout the year. They do have two really strong growth patterns, which is actually right after flower. So you have your spring growth, and then you have a little bit more of the summer growth. So the one thing is that for azaleas, if you have the azalea that flowers 2 times a year, you do want to be really good at pruning right after flower. So like that, you don't prune the flowers. So one of the things, like in the picture in the top, you can see that one of the things I try to do is try to shape those branches that are growing out. And I try to keep my azalea growing all together, not just sides that are growing stronger. So I remove all those growths at the in the outer edges or at the top. Here we have it at the top. I do cut down those branches that is sticking out. And those I do right after flowering. And then what they're gonna do, they're gonna shoot out again. And then I go and tip them, just cut a little bit, a quarter of them. So like that, they produce more branches and stop growing really strong. So azaleas is a plant that you can just cut a little bit throughout the year, and that will do really good. One of the things also that I do with the azaleas is, you see those branches that are really thick. This, for example, was a branch that was left to grow for the whole year and became another plant on top of that plant. So when I remove those, when I cut down those, a lot of the times I don't have a branch to cut to. So usually I say cut to something. In this case, with azaleas, is one of the plants that I say you can cut to nothing, leave a little stub, and they will produce from there. These azaleas, camellias, and rhododendrons had the virtue, because I think that that's a really good asset as a plant care person, that is that you can just cut back and they will grow. So they grow in the old wood and they regenerate really well. That doesn't mean go and cut everything and don't leave any foliage in your plant if you're gonna reduce it, because that could stress the plant and produce the wrong effects, like dying or just shooting kind of crazy shoots. So yeah. To cut the legginess, again, I have it here, just in case that wasn't clear. If you have like a really leggy azalea, what I do is I cut the tips like a quarter down, and that will produce, that's like, the tips had some hormones that make the plant keep growing tall and tall and tall. So when you tip that top, you cut that hormone, and the reaction of the plant is produce new branching. So that is how keep azaleas kind of thick. With rhododendrons, I have few different things I do throughout the year. So the first thing is, yes, I do cut rhododendrons right after they flower. It's just one of the things that they do. The first thing I do is I remove that dead flower stem, and you can just, if you are like right at the point that they are finishing, like they have this picture, so they will snap with your fingers. So that's one of the things I do. I don't leave those things there. At the moment I'm doing that, I can see, you know, how many buds I have. Those buds that you see there when they are removing the flower, you can see the buds. Those are vegetative buds. Those are not flower buds. That is going to tell you how much shoots, new growth are you going to have. So in that case, I will just remove that flower and that will be it. The other thing that we do to make that plant thicker, grow thicker, is when those buds are developing. So this is this picture up here, and they are growing, start to grow. You can remove those buds, and I only remove them when I have just one bud on each whorl. So the plants, rhododendrons, grow in whorls. They are not opposite. What do I mean? In every section of the where the leaves are, there are like five leaves or 3 leaves sometimes, but usually there are 4 or 5 leaves. So that is a whorl. And then the next section, you have another 3 leaves. So what that tells you is you can have 3 to 5 buds in every whorl. So when I have only one of the one shoot or one bud developing in that section, what I do is I remove it. And I don't remove the bud because that gives the wrong stimulus. So what I do is stimulus. So what I do is I let it develop a little bit, kind of like open up, and then I remove it. And by removing it at that time, again, I'm removing that hormone, and the plant, what the plant does is putting 2 or 3 new shoots and new buds. So that is one of the things I do for rhododendrons, not to get all leggy. The other thing I do is I keep, I can cut down. So the way I can cut down, there are 2 things. If I want to reduce my rhododendron, I cut down to a lower whorl. So those sections that I was talking about where the leaves or branches are, so those are, I cut down to a branch, or I cut down to a leaf, and that will develop new growth at that point. And if my rhododendron is way too tall and you just have leaves at the top, so one of the things I'm showing in this little picture here is if I need to reduce the plant on the side, what I do is I look for those buds. So you can see that in this case are yellow, and this one is, the brown is, I think, dead, but the yellow ones are the new buds, the buds that are growing in the old wood. So those buds are vegetative buds that are gonna shoot out if I cut. So that green line is where I will do my cut if I have buds in the lower section and I want to start new growth in the lower section. I will not do this with the whole plant, just because, you know, I'm taking a chance and it's not my plant, it's my client's plant. So usually what I do, I look for the buds and then I select half of the branches to be lower, and then I leave some of the green foliage at the top, and then next year, or when the plant has some growth in there, so then I come and reduce the other branches I didn't reduce at that time. The important thing is that you always have some foliage that can photosynthesize and help the plant to handle the pruning that I am doing. Also, the one thing I do want to clarify, when you go below 2 or 3 whorls, so when you are going to these low sections in your plant, so your plant is not going to produce flowers in the next year in those sections. They produce flowers in the other sections. That is the reason why I kind of like do selective pruning with them, so like that I can still reduce them and they can still flower. And then for the pruning of the camellias, this is a little bit more, I love camellias because camellias, one, is a good plant to learn how to prune. It reacts really well, and it can be really, really ornamental. Like it can be the focal point if you select the right camellia, and if you do really nice pruning. They don't need to look like bushes. They can look like divas. So with the camellias, I do go with my usual pruning schedule. So I am gonna talk about how I treat camellias that I wanted to make more like divas in the garden. So the first is I always cut the 3 Ds, dead, disease, and damage. And you should do that every time with all the plants in all your pruning, cut the dead, disease, and damage. And the reason is, one, you want to make sure that that will clear out a lot of the things in your plant. You are not gonna believe how much that debris generates inside your plant. 2, it helps you realize how your plant is doing. If you have a lot of dead and disease and damage, you wanna make sure that you start taking care of the health of the plant. And then the second thing I do is analyze the structure. And I have tried to put drawings, and I have tried to put a lot of things. And people, I keep asking, how do you think about this drawing? Did you understand it? So let's see if I can try to show it with this picture. So when I analyze the structure, I'm looking at the branch flow. So I see how the branch developed. I see where it's located in the plant. Is this like part of my main structure? Is this my secondary structure? And I see how it's flowing. So in this big picture, we can see how the plant is, like having one major branch coming from one side and going through the other side. So I see some crossing. That is something that you want to avoid in camellias. You don't want a plant that is growing from one side all the way to the other side, the branch. So the other thing that you can do is look for parallel branches. So in this case, you do have these 2 branches growing in the same point. So they are competing and they are crowding your plant. So a lot of the times I take my time to look at my structure and see, instead of cutting, just look at your structure and see how it's flowing, where those branches are located, where those branches are growing, how they relate to each other. That is time that you get your coffee and go out there and just take your time. That is going to help you to identify what to cut. People always ask me, how do you know what to cut? Well, this is the way. I look at my structure. I go from the bottom, from the point they are growing, and see how they are developing. If they have something growing in the middle, so for example, in this middle picture, I have my structure and then there is something right coming through the middle. So that crossing is, if I start pruning, I don't realize that crossing exists. But if I take my time to look at the structure, I realize that that branch is there, and that branch is coming from below. And just by removing that branch, I'm gonna open up my structure. So I'm gonna open up my plant. So I do that throughout. This is throughout the tree. When I am gonna start developing, like, what do I cut now? I identify those two. I wanna cut one. So then I will go with, okay, how do I want my plant to grow? I want my plant to go down, my plant to go up. I want my plant to go left, or I want my plant to go right. And like that, I do my cuttings. So in this case, for example, one of the things that I want people to realize, and I also put this picture here, is in this case, this cut was because we had two branches going together, and I cut this one. Now this part is trying to heal. I didn't do good cuts. So in this case, I have a stub that the tree is trying to callus. So what is happening when it rains, the water go through it. So that is not good. I want this plant to be able to callus. So good cuts are really important. So in this case, for example, this picture over here is something that shows a good cut. It's something that the cut is kind of rounded. It has a good angle. I'm cutting to something. There is a branch that is gonna support this cut. This branch is gonna help this cut to close up faster. So I do all that when I'm pruning. Remember, every open wound that you do in your tree is something that the tree is gonna have some time walling off or walling off. So you want to make sure that the plant is able to heal the wounds that we are generating with the pruning. After we do that structural pruning, one of the things I do is I go, okay, now in my overall, I'm looking at the little branches, and then I thin out some of those little branches. So in this case, one of the things that happened with camellias a lot is because of the weight of the flower pulls the branch down. So sometimes they have a lot of those branches going downwards. So I try to remove some of those branches that are going downwards. I try to make a little bit of that flat branching. Also to reduce, so in this case, for example, these two cuts is that I am reducing the length. So if my branch is too long, I can make that branch lift up a little bit or reduce in length if I am trying to reduce my camellia by pruning to a secondary branch. So in this case, we see here that red is where I will do the cut, and now I have this branch, and this branch are gonna develop, and I remove the rest of the thing. So I go like that throughout the plant, removing anything that is hanging down, growing down, and generating that flat and thinning it out and reducing in length. So the one thing I do want to, in here, I'm trying to show like the same thing about good cuts. So here is the angle. In this section, I'm showing you, okay, now you have that V, and I want to cut right above. So here in this section, you can see the color. The color comes from the point I'm cutting all the way to here. It's kind of like that wrinkle, different smooth section here. That is what I want. I want to leave that there. I want to cut right above the color, and that is going to help callusing your wound. In here in the lower section, you can see how that wound is callusing. So we want to make sure that if we're going to prune your camellia or your rhododendron, we go through these steps about doing good cuts, looking at your structure, and then thinning it out. Camellias, you can cut really strong, but however, sometimes when you do renovation, that is like you are actually cutting more than half of your camellia, they end up just growing and not producing flowers next year, or just really few flowers. So the camellias, the rhododendrons, and the azaleas they do produce the flower bud on fall. So that means you don't want to do any of this pruning after fall. All this pruning is done after flower or from spring to summer. And then you are okay about not cutting the flowers.
Hey, Elizabeth, can I stop you for a quick second before you move on? You said something that really sticks out to me, and it's a conversation that I have with customers really often about cutting to something. You know, that's a big one. You always want to try to cut down to, you know, whatever that next something is, whether that is you know, another leaf section, whether that's like she showed the picture, you know, down to the section where the collar is. That's really huge. You don't want to just randomly have all these snippets all over the place that are, you know, 2 inches above where a leaf section is or anything like that. Really try to pay attention to cutting down to something, because it's a super easy tip, you know, that you can use to make sure that things just are much smoother and way healthier. Sorry to interrupt you, but I was just thinking, God, that's a big one because we talk about it all the time.
Yeah, no, actually that was the whole I actually was ready for the Q&A.
Oh, well, wonderful. Okay, let me see here then. Where are we? What's left? One of the questions that was asked was about using a sealant, some kind of sealant on the cuts. You mentioned that, you know, naturally it will callus over, but are there circumstances where it makes sense to use some kind of sealant?
Yeah, you know, I would say when you have really big cats, like something like is like 4 or 5 inches, I am, for example, in weathers like this, that is like really wet for long periods of time. If that wound, so pretty much if you have a tree and your branch and the part that you are cutting, your branch that is sustained or your trunk that is sustained, and the part that are cutting are kind of like the same size. And
Right.
we are talking about like being 3 to 4 inches. Those are gonna take long time to callus. And if they are a lot of the times with the weather like that, they start kind of like getting rotten, stuff like that. So what I do is to prevent that, I put a sealer, and you guys have it at slots. I don't think I have a picture of it right now.
Right. The pruning sealer. It's like in a little can.
Yeah, it's a little can, and they sell it in a spray. I used the spray once, but I sprayed the wall in my client's house. So now I use the can with the brush, and I actually put that. So what I do is I put that before the wind, and I do that with other plants too. I put that before the winter. So in fall, I go in my fall pruning, I go and put some of the sealer in there, so that protects the water from coming in these plants. Yeah, especially when you're doing big cuts. Little cuts like finger, like a thumb, those are okay. The plant is gonna wall off those in few years, and that is not a problem. But something that is not gonna be able to callus for like 5, 6 years, you want to put that.
Right. And it was interesting, you were even talking about how like one of the cuts you had done previously like wasn't a good cut. And, you know, I struggle with that too. You know, I was talking about cutting the maple that I was working on the other day. And sometimes with angles, like it's so hard to get it, you know, perfectly smooth and to get that, to be able to follow the collar of the branch. It's not easy. But, you know, that's why there's multiple tools and different, you know, long handled pruners and, you know, little short handled pruners, and they come in different sizes. So if you're just doing like little tiny baby size branches, you know, it's way easier to use, you know, small and not as strong, you know, pruners. Whereas if you're trying to get something that's, you know, 3/4 to an inch thick, you know, you're going to have to put some elbow grease in there. So make sure that you're using the right tool for the job. That makes it so much easier. And don't be like me and don't just get a ladder and get up there to where you need to. So, yeah. Right, because a right tool for the job. Okay, so the other questions we had, Somebody was asking about espaliers and if there's any differences, you know, within espalier, because it's flat, you tend to want like upward and downward branching so that it can kind of fill in that flatter full wall look. I mean, I would imagine that you kind of temper your advice based on what area you're trying to fill in. You could do some downward, you know, facing branching if you are pruning an espalier, right?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I will say, you know, like that is the beauty. For example, espalier camellias are really beautiful. I
Right.
love them. I have few of them. And one of the things is just, that is what I try to, because camellias flow so much, what I try to do is that is when I realized, yes, I can guide the camellia to do something. So in
Right.
this case, for example, we have that. I try to flatten the branches by cutting something that's sticking out if I don't want it. Or you can say, okay, I want go that way, so the branch we will go that way. If it's a branch that is going low and I need it, you can cut to that branch. So it's a really good, camellias are really good. The only thing I will say for the espaliers is that you do want to try to prune more than once a year with
Right.
the espaliers. So again, for those, you have pruning time from spring to summer. So I will go and do maybe two prunings a year to keep it
Right.
flat, keep it full. Yeah. And having branches at the bottom. So because
Right.
if you just let it for the whole year, you just let it be, you are gonna have a lot of top at the growth at the top and no
Right.
at the lower section.
Right. That makes sense. Absolutely. I mean, espaliers are so beautiful, but you're right. They take a different level of like patience, and some of the tips and tricks are just slightly different for espaliers. So that was a great question. Let's see what else. What about like with azaleas? I guess plants in general, but azaleas, because I've seen it happen also with azaleas. One of our viewers are asking about azaleas that send branches up from underground.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think according with how I'm seeing my plants, sometimes I use them, sometimes I remove them. It's
Right.
not like don't treat it as a sucker, because it is not really a sucker, it's part of the
Okay.
plant. And sometimes when I am trying to reduce the plant really strong, I remove some of those. If I'm trying to change the shape of the plant or reinvigorate the plant, I use them. So it is totally dependable in how your plant is going, how that branch is going. If it's growing through my main structure of my little azalea, I must probably remove it. But if it's coming from a place that I have a hole and I wanted to fill it up, so what I do though with those is, because they shoot so long, so again,
Right.
I cut them down to a certain height. And in that case, I kind of break a little bit of my rule about cutting to something. With the azaleas, I do that. Sometimes I go and I have an azalea that is just shooting, and I don't have nothing but leaves at the top and nothing at the bottom. It's just a straight stick. So I just kind of like prune right anywhere,
Right.
because azaleas had that ability to just sprout right where you cut. So one of the things I try to do is if I want my azalea to be here and I have a shoot that is coming out, so what I do is I try to cut way below, so my shoots come from below, and then I cut those again, and that is how I make those more thicker, like branching more.
Okay. That's awesome. I think one last one we had was on removing, like for camellias, does it make sense to remove some of the buds, you know, in order to spur on bigger, stronger buds? Like when you're starting the same way that you had mentioned with the rhododendron, you know, kind of pulling off some of that, the first flower once it starts to open, so that you can spur on, you know, the production of additional blooms. Is that true for camellias also?
Oh, I guess that was kind of like a misunderstanding.
Okay.
Yeah, so in this case, with what I was doing, let me share my screen again because, wait, did I lose you guys?
No, you're still there, but the screen is not there.
Oh, okay, let me see.
I mean,
One of
that's
the
okay.
Okay, so one of the things I tried to say was that we want to remove is the flower buds. So in this case, we
Right.
want to remove the flower buds when the flowers are done. So
Okay.
in these ones, those buds that you see there are vegetative buds. They are like ready to grow as soon as they finish with the flowering.
Right.
In this picture over here, when these white things
Yeah.
are the new leaves that are coming out. So the bud is already opening and the new leaf is coming out. And so in that case, I remove those. If I have only one shoot, so this picture, I only have one shoot coming out of vegetative bud opening up. So what I do is I remove it here. And then I remove all of them. So like that, they will produce 2 shoots instead of just one, if I want my rhododendron to be thicker.
And so that's only true for rhododendron and not so much for camellias, just because of the way that they grow, right?
Yes,
Got
that is
it.
true for rhododendrons only. Camellias, however, you could, like one of the things I do sometimes thin out some of the flowers at the bud stage when I have a branch, like the flowers are so heavy.
Right.
So I want the branch to be able, one of my clients is like, I love the camellia, but when it's flowering, the branches are so heavy, the flowers are looking down, no up, so I don't really see the flowers. So in that case, if I know that is happening, I thin some of the flowers so the branch is not so heavy and the flower open up really nice, and it's a nice show.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's about it for our questions. Like I said, there are so many of our, like the rhodies that we have, the rhododendron that we have at the nursery, like they're all budded and I feel like every day I'm like, come on. Like, I can't wait for them to bloom. I didn't used to be a big rhododendron fan, but there are so many gorgeous, blooms and colors and just variations that rhododendrons have become one of my favorites. So tons of camellias available, tons of azaleas available. Some of the questions I had, Elizabeth, were just how some of this information also relates to gardenias and, maybe some hydrangea here and there, although I know we've talked about those in other classes. But, as acid lovers, a lot of what Elizabeth has talked about today, translate over to those other plants also. So there are other webinars on our website that you can check out that are more specific, that include gardenias and hydrangea. And I'm sure that as we're moving into spring, there will be many more webinars and presentations on those specifically, but a lot of the same aesthetic pruning tips, relate to those as well. So you really can't go wrong with the advice that Elizabeth has given us today. You are in very, very good hands. Thank you guys so much just for hanging in there with us today. Like I said, Elizabeth and I were a little frazzled this morning. We were both having computer and, issues, and Elizabeth has construction going on near her home, so she had to move rooms. So was a little frazzled this morning. So thank you for allowing us to kind of settle in and sticking with us this morning. I'm super happy to have you all. Again, this presentation is going to be posted on our website and then also on our YouTube channel as of Tuesday. Feel free to reach out to Elizabeth. Her email is, of course, I don't have it here. What is your email, Elizabeth?
Is gowithnature@yahoo.com.
There it is, gowithnature@yahoo.com. So definitely, if you have questions that we weren't able to cover, or if we weren't able to delve deeply into stuff that you still have remaining questions on, please email Elizabeth. She is available for hire. She does come out and do consultations, so you can definitely reach her at that email address. Again, happy to have you all. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon. Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
You guys take care. Bye.
Bye.